In April 2026, Christopher Miles accepted the position of night manager at an old hotel overlooking the Scottish coast. The building had welcomed guests for more than 100 years and was famous for its peaceful atmosphere and spectacular view of the sea. Christopher quickly grew to enjoy working the night shift. After midnight, the hotel became almost completely silent. His responsibilities were simple: assist late arrivals, monitor the reception desk, and prepare reports for the morning staff. 3 weeks after he began working there, he noticed something unusual. Every night at exactly 2:27 a.m., room 214 appeared occupied in the hotel system for precisely 1 minute before disappearing again. According to the reservation records, however, room 214 had remained empty for more than 15 years. Christopher assumed it was nothing more than a software error. The following evening, he decided to remain at the reception desk shortly before 2:27 a.m. At exactly the same time, the hotel's antique reception bell rang softly by itself. No guests were standing before him. No doors had opened. No footsteps could be heard within the empty lobby. Then, the computer screen changed. Room 214, checked in. The message remained visible for exactly 60 seconds before disappearing once more. Disturbed by what he had witnessed, Christopher immediately reviewed the hotel's security cameras. Every corridor appeared empty, except one. For less than 2 seconds, camera 14 showed someone quietly standing outside room 214. The figure wore an old-fashioned dark coat and appeared to be holding a suitcase. Before Christopher could enlarge the image, the recording suddenly corrupted itself. The mysterious guest had disappeared. The following morning, he mentioned the incident to an elderly employee who had worked at the hotel for more than 30 years. The man's expression immediately changed. "You've seen him," he quietly replied. "Seen who?" Christopher asked. The old employee hesitated before answering. The silent guest. According to him, the mysterious visitor had appeared at the hotel for decades. No one knew who he was or where he came from. Yet every employee knew one simple rule: never knock on the door of room 214 at 2:27 a.m. Before leaving, the elderly employee quietly handed Christopher an old brass key. "Keep this with you," he whispered. "You'll understand why tomorrow." Christopher didn't know whether to laugh or feel afraid. Yet that evening, for the very first time since beginning his new job, he locked the reception office door before midnight. At exactly 2:27 a.m., the reception bell rang once again. And this time, someone quietly whispered, "Thank you for waiting." Christopher didn't sleep much after hearing the mysterious voice. "Thank you for waiting." He spent the following day wondering whether he should resign from his position at the hotel. Everything he had witnessed seemed impossible to explain. Yet, despite his fear, he returned for another night shift. Before midnight, he remembered the old brass key the elderly employee had given him. It was unusually heavy and bore only one engraving: 214. Curiously, it wasn't the hotel's standard room key. It looked much older. When Christopher asked the elderly employee about it, the man quietly replied, "It doesn't open the door. It reminds us never to try." At exactly 2:27 a.m., the reception bell rang once again. The hotel's computer displayed the familiar message: Room 214, checked in. This time, however, something was different. A guest's name appeared beneath it for the very first time: Mr. Thomas Gray. Christopher immediately searched the hotel's archives. There were hundreds of reservation records dating back decades, but none mentioned that name. Then he discovered something even stranger. Every 10 years, on the same date, room 214 had briefly appeared occupied at exactly 2:27 a.m. 1906, 1907, 1908, and so it continued for more than 100 years. The same room, the same time, always for exactly 60 seconds. Unable to resist his curiosity any longer, Christopher opened the security cameras once again. There, standing quietly outside room 214, was the mysterious guest. The dark coat, the old suitcase, and for the first time, his face could be seen clearly. He appeared no older than 40 years old, yet his clothes belonged to another century. Then something unexpected happened. The silent guest slowly raised his hand and pointed toward the reception desk. Christopher looked down in confusion. Resting upon the wooden counter was an old hotel registration card that hadn't been there moments before. Only 4 words had been written upon it: "Please don't follow me." At that exact moment, every light inside the hotel briefly went out. When they returned only seconds later, the mysterious figure had disappeared from the security cameras once again. Then the elevator doors quietly opened by themselves. No one stepped outside. And yet, the elevator display showed only one destination. 214. Christopher immediately remembered the elderly employee's warning. Never knock on the door of room 214 at 2:27 a.m. Slowly, another message appeared upon the computer screen. Check out. Tomorrow. For reasons he couldn't explain, Christopher knew the message wasn't intended for the silent guest. It was intended for him. For the first time since beginning his new job at the hotel, he wasn't afraid of who was waiting inside room 214. He was afraid of what might happen tomorrow. Christopher spent the entire following day thinking about the message displayed on the hotel's computer screen. Check out. Tomorrow. He couldn't explain why, but he was certain it wasn't referring to the silent guest. That evening, he arrived earlier than usual and decided to remain in the reception office until the end of his shift. Before midnight, the elderly employee quietly approached him one final time. "You're lucky," he softly said. "Lucky?" Christopher asked. "The silent guest doesn't visit everyone." Before Christopher could ask another question, the old man quietly added, "He only visits those who need to leave." At exactly 2:27 a.m., the reception bell rang once again. The lights throughout the hotel flickered briefly before returning to normal. The computer screen displayed its familiar message. Room 214. Checked in. Moments later, another line slowly appeared beneath it. Mr. Christopher Miles. Christopher immediately felt his blood run cold. Then the elevator doors quietly opened once more. No one stood inside. And yet, resting upon the floor was an old leather suitcase. It was identical to the one carried by the silent guest. Attached to its handle was a small handwritten note. Not every place is meant to become home. At that moment, every security camera inside the hotel briefly changed. They no longer showed the empty corridors of the building. Instead, they displayed old photographs of the hotel taken decades earlier. And standing quietly within each photograph was the same mysterious guest. Always watching, always waiting. Then Christopher noticed something impossible. The silent guest was standing beside him in the reflection of the reception desk. For the first time, he wasn't afraid. The mysterious stranger simply smiled before quietly whispering 4 simple words. "It's time to go." The lights flickered once more, and he was gone. At exactly 2:28 a.m., room 214 disappeared from the hotel's reservation system forever. It has never appeared there again. The following morning, Christopher resigned from his position and accepted an opportunity that had been offered to him months earlier in another city, an opportunity he had been too afraid to pursue. Years later, he still wonders whether the silent guest was ever truly there. Perhaps it was nothing more than an impossible coincidence. Or perhaps some mysteries don't arrive to frighten us. Perhaps they arrive to remind us when it is time to move forward. To this day, the elderly employee continues working at the old hotel overlooking the Scottish coast. And whenever a new member of staff begins working the night shift, he quietly tells them only one thing. If the silent guest ever thanks you for waiting, don't be afraid. He's not coming to stay. He's coming to say goodbye.